with all the crazy music you're playing, do you have a preference, or are you just in the moment?
I'm pretty in the moment, but I'm a blues cat for sure. Like, I'm a Stevie Ray Vaughan fanatic. Yeah, I love some funk too, and Motown. I don't know. I listen to it all. Yeah, and it all feels good.
Harvest Jazz and Blues created a commonality in Fredericton. And if you look at the history of Fredericton, it got big when Queen Victoria selected it for the cathedral. And then the military followed the church. And then the university flourished because of the other cultural institutions. And then it became capital city. But on a Saturday night, you got a guy from the church, a guy from the military, a guy from the university, and a guy from the government. They're not getting down. But Harvest created that calm down. Nobody's anything at Harvest. They're all just people in Fredericton.
God, that's an old one.
Yeah.
Wow.
Urban Street.
Discover the blues.
Do you know what that was with? It was many years ago. But we did, over 3 years, we did 3 different Bubba projects. So I did Bubba and the Roadmasters, I had Bubba Got the Blues, and Bubba Can't Dance. And then did 3 in a row. And then Brent caught on. You know, and sort of went, well, you're not really putting a band, anyways, it's a project every year, right? But it was all good. We opened for some cool shows, that's awesome.
Well, I like to call Hutch New Brunswick's greatest impresario. And as you know, the definition of impresario is an organizer of public events. We've touched on a lot of them. Harvest is the biggest one, River Jam, and the Bubba Trilogy, but the list goes on and on and on.
In the first year of Harvest, I was able to get a couple of labor grants to get some summer help as we were gearing up for the harvest. So it wasn't some planning committee, this was staff, right? And 2 people, Mary Ellen Lake and Bernie Boxall. And they spent that summer getting ready for that first harvest and helped out, basically managed it, right? And then after harvest was done, I left and went up north. And when I went up north, the logical person to take over was Mary Ellen.
How did I get involved? Well, back then, in those days, in the early 90s, I was working for a company, an events planning company. So, you know, organizing trade shows and different receptions, events, conferences. And I met Rick Hutchins, in my travels. So being an event planner, he thought, yeah, I need someone like you who's, you know, can organize things. I had time on my hands, so wanted to help him out. I went to the first couple of meetings at the old piano bar at the Cosmo, and Hutch, you know, explained his vision for this new event that could bring live music back to the city, and everybody was on board. You know, it started with, sure, I'll put up a few posters, or yeah, I can sell the advertising, or whatever the case was. And that, I mean, that led to 10, 12 years being on the board and growing that festival in its early years.
Seabrook's another class guy that this city really benefits from, again in tourism. I think he's a real mover actually in our city.
I knew Hutch, and Hutch called me up one day and he said, I've got this idea for a festival, Jazz and Blues Festival in Fredericton. And I said, Hutch, that'll never work. And he said, well, I'm having I'm bringing a couple of friends together at the, I think it was the piano bar at the Cosmo, the old bar downtown, and why don't you just come? And I went to the meeting, and I walked out the music director. And so for the first 6 years of the festival, I was the music director. We produced the festival the first year out of my apartment with Bernie Boxall and Mary Ellen Hudson were the summer staff. I was the music director, Hutch was the chair, and then we had a board, and it was really sort of magic. We had no idea what we were doing.
A lot of those same core people back then are still involved, helping to shape that festival today, which is amazing to see. And he's always kind of keeping it on track as a real community festival, a real community event. He kind of is almost like a rudder, like he kind of kept it on course. When you get other new people and want to turn it in this direction or that direction or go really big, he was always the voice to keep it on course with what its true community festival roots were. Back then, of course, Fredericton didn't have any large festivals like that, so we were all learning as we went. We'd learn from the previous year, what would we do different, what can we improve. We learned pretty quickly in those early days.
One of the things I always say about Harvest is, it made tons of mistakes. Always makes mistakes, but it rarely makes the same mistake twice. Mary Ellen is a great event organizer, very detailed, brings a lot of enthusiasm, loves working with people, can generate a lot of tourism. So, and she has produced many, many great events for this community. So, whenever I know in my work life, even today, when we have an event that we need, produced on behalf of the community, we often turn to Mary Ellen because she sort of has a way of rolling out great events.
I think things really started growing when Brent came in. I mean, the festival wouldn't be where it is today without Brent Staven there all these years. All the connections he now has in the music world and jazz and blues and everything else in between. I mean, that's how you get your sponsors and community involvement, right? It's, I know someone at the bank. I know someone at Valley Graphics. I know someone at Southern Comfort or Miller Beer. Like, it was all those connections.
Brent and I have been friends since we were not even quite teenagers. We were swimmers together. He had a brilliant way of being able to balance the business side, the organizational side, the process side of the festival with the artistic side of the festival, and having a vision. And his mind is able to piece together the connective tissue in the music community in a way that I've never seen anyone else be able to do. So he would know that the drummer in this band knew somebody in this band, and that their uncle, or they had the same uncle or something, like crazy little connective bits of tissue that would result that if he set them up in the right way on the schedule, that you'd get a jam out of that. And then Harvest developed this reputation of these sort of impromptu moments where all of a sudden someone steps up and you're like, how did that happen?
Harvest land back then, you just brought in everybody. Like I was playing softball at the time. Every single person on my softball team volunteered, and some of them still do today. Everybody I worked with at Environment, they came in as a volunteer, and some of them are still volunteers today. So, same thing with Dave. He knew Brent and drew Brent into Harvest, and he's still instrumental in shaping, the musical landscape of Harvest. Like I said, here we are, like, decades later.
One of the challenges in our society generally is the speed of everything and the speed of judgment, right? And Harvest grew up in a pre-social media world, and we made many mistakes, and we learned from those mistakes, but it grew organically. I often tell, many people have come to me over the years in my tourism role, consultants and other festivals from around the country, and asked, how did you do this? And I struggle to sort of give an easy roadmap for someone else to replicate, because it grew so organically. Because we did one thing, we tripped, we learned, we did it better the next year, and then we grew. And the history of Harvest is sort of a growth spurt and a consolidation year, a growth spurt and a consolidation year. But it over a long period of time. If you had tried to go from year 3 of harvest to year 20 or 25 of harvest, it wouldn't have worked, it would have collapsed.
And you really have to recognize the volunteers and how the organization, when Hutch talked earlier about the community-based values of all this, you know, they're really good to the volunteers, and there's no question that that is the key to the business model.
Now, Harvest wouldn't be where it is today without the hundreds of volunteers. You know, for years, the first 10, 12 years or so, you know, we were lucky to have a summer staff to operate a store, which, you know, the store's always been there at various locations around downtown over the years. But, yeah, and I don't know if the community even realizes that that board, the people who run Harvest and make the decisions and make that festival happen all year long, like, they're volunteers. They're not getting paid for those countless hours of organizational work that's put into the festival. Everybody thinks of the hundreds of volunteers that come on board during the festival to serve you that beer, click and count you into the tent, or, you know, set up the tents, all that stuff. There's just so many volunteer hours put in. And, you know, Harvest is really lucky that they've had so many volunteers, and volunteers keep coming back year over year. I don't think other festivals have that luck. And I think it's because Harvest really does a good job in treating their volunteers like they do the musicians really well. You know, there's always, someone's always there making sure you get a break, or, because they're, you know, long shifts on your feet all night, but you're getting, you know, making sure you have a break, have a glass of water, you know, go to the tent and get some pizza. They really, there's always a volunteer appreciation party afterwards. And, you know, it does, even today, it's your network of friends. You make connections and so many friendships, and even, you know, marriages. Like, I met my own husband at the Boys Farmers Market during the festival way back in the late 90s. The show there at the market, CJ Chenier was playing from Louisiana, and there I was with the gold lame jacket. Steve comes over, talks to me, and, you know, we met the next week. I think Roger House, he was a headliner one year. He came back to town to play at the loading dock here, and that's when Steve and I really got to talk. And a few years later, there we married. And I could tell you, you know, there's countless of other people who have met either best friends today or their husband or wife because of Harvest. It's more than a volunteer gig. It's so much more.
And I think 28 years later, we have a Fredericton that actually is culturally interested, curious, sensitive, that wants to come together, that loves sort of gathering events. I think that those are important considerations. So when people say, you know, to me, you know, what was your love of music that got you involved? Actually, I remember how Hutch pitched it to me. Hutch said to me, I was 24 years old, and Hutch said, you know, you're never going to be the guy that joins, you know, this club or that club, but you need to contribute to your community, and this is the way to do it. That's how he got me to go to that meeting. And yeah, when I think back on it, it actually makes me emotional, because it was a huge turning point in how I viewed my community and my role in the community. And that one sentence from Hutch sort of resonated for decades.
That first experience was when the tent used to be across from McGinnis Landing. You do something and there's a light on you, and you know, you just feel so special, right? Best gig of the year.
Do you have one memorable moment on that you played that stood out for you at Harvest Jazz in particular for you that you, like, you know, I'm sure there's been moments and it's off the top, but anything that kind of pops out?
The first thing that came to my mind is when they gave us the big opening show on the Wednesday of the 25th anniversary.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was a big stage, and they did really nice videos of it and sound. So that was nice to be recognized that way. And they've always got a place for us. I don't know why. But yeah.